So there's this one drug that for decades completely changed the game for breast cancer survivors. But how do we actually figure out who it helps most and for how long? Well, today we're going to dig into the landmark research that gave us those crucial answers.
All right, so let's start with a fear that's all too real for anyone who's been through a cancer diagnosis. You have the surgery, it's successful, but there's always that nagging question, right? That shadow of a threat that just hangs there.
When we talk about early breast cancer, we mean the tumor is found when it's still confined, so it can be completely removed with surgery. And look, that is a huge moment of relief. But it's often not the end of the story. You see, these tiny, microscopic cancer cells can sometimes be left behind, just waiting, ready to pop up again years down the road. And that right there, that leads to the million-dollar question that drove a whole field of research. Once the tumor's gone, how do you make absolutely sure the cancer doesn't come back? That was the puzzle that doctors were desperate to solve.
So, to get a really solid answer, researchers did something pretty brilliant. Instead of just starting one new study from scratch, they went bigger, way bigger. They decided to pool all the evidence from dozens of trials that had already been done.
This technique is called a meta-analysis. And a great way to think about it is, imagine you have dozens of kind of blurry photos, but when you stack them all on top of each other, you get one super sharp, crystal clear picture. That's what they did with the data. They combined it to find a clear signal that was maybe too weak to see in any one study by itself.
And the scale of this thing, I mean, it is just staggering. We're talking about individual data from almost 37,000 women. That is a massive number, and it gives the results some serious statistical muscle. And these women weren't just from a couple of studies either. Nope. The data came from 55 different randomized trials, pulled from all over the globe. This basically made it one of the most complete, comprehensive reviews ever done in cancer research. Period. Okay, so out of all this massive effort, one finding stood out above everything else. The key discovery was that the drug they were studying, tamoxifen, its effectiveness all came down to one critical detail about the tumor itself. And that detail is something called its estrogen receptor status, or ER status for short. So here's the deal. Think of some cancer cells as having a lock on them. That's the estrogen receptor. And the hormone estrogen, that's the key. When the key fits into the lock, it basically tells the cancer cell, hey, time to grow. What tamoxifen does is it cleverly blocks that lock so the key can't get in. So here's where it gets really interesting. For women whose tumors were ER positive, the ones with that estrogen lock, tamoxifen worked like a charm. It was incredibly effective. But for women with ER poor tumors, the study showed the benefit was, it was small and kind of uncertain. This was a huge breakthrough. It meant we could move away from a one-size-fits-all treatment. For the first time, doctors could really target this therapy to the people it was actually going to help. Okay, so now we know who this drug helps, but that's only half the puzzle, right? The next big question was, for how long? Do you take it for a year, 2 years, 5 years? Well, it turns out the data had a very clear answer on this. I mean, just take a look at these numbers. 1 year of taking tamoxifen cut the risk of the cancer coming back by 21%. Okay, not bad. 2 years, that number jumps to 29%. But check this out. 5 years, the benefit nearly doubles, slashing the recurrence rate by 47%. The evidence right here is just undeniable. So the takeaway here is crystal clear. This massive study basically established 5 years of tamoxifen as the new gold standard. This wasn't just a hunch. It was a solid conclusion backed by the data from tens of thousands of women that showed, hey, the longer you take it, up to 5 years, the better it works. But, with any powerful medicine, there's always a trade-off. It's never just about the good stuff. And to their credit, the researchers didn't shy away from this. They carefully looked at the risks, too, to give doctors and patients the full, unvarnished picture. So they really boiled it down to the two biggest long-term effects. Let's start with the huge benefit. Taking tamoxifen for 5 years cut the risk of getting a new cancer in the other breast, that's called contralateral breast cancer, by a whopping 47%. That's amazing. But here's the risk side. It also quadrupled the risk of developing endometrial cancer. And that is definitely a serious risk you have to consider.
But here's how the researchers themselves put that risk into perspective. And this is so important. They pointed out that when you look at the actual numbers, the benefit was way bigger than the harm. In fact, for every one extra case of endometrial cancer that occurred, the drug prevented about 2 cases of contralateral breast cancer. So yes, it was a trade-off, but the scale was tipped heavily in favor of the life-saving benefit. So when you put it all together, 55 trials, 37,000 women, weighing all the incredible benefits against the serious risks, what was the final verdict? What was the bottom line? Well, this quote from the study's conclusion really says it all. And by the way, they call it adjuvant tamoxifen, which just means it's a treatment you get after your main surgery is done. And what they said was, for women with that ER-positive type of breast cancer, the evidence was just overwhelming. Taking this drug for about 5 years gave them a much, much better shot at living a long, cancer-free life. The study didn't just suggest something new, it literally established a standard of care that has gone on to save an untold number of lives. You know, what's so cool about this is it shows the incredible power of just looking back at old research with fresh eyes. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other huge life-saving breakthroughs are just sitting there, hidden inside data that we've already collected, just waiting for someone to connect the dots?